The water is black, and the sky is worse. Somewhere between the Chinese mainland and the island of Quemoy, a Fletcher-class destroyer cuts through a 4-foot swell with her running lights killed. No moon, the only light comes in bursts, white-orange flashes erupting from the distant coast, blooming and dying in under a second. Then the sound, a low, concussive thud rolling across the water. Then the shriek, steel tearing through air overhead at 800 meters per second. Then a distant detonation on the island behind you. Flash, boom, overhead scream, splash. This is the Formosa Strait, autumn of 1958. And the ship holding station between the guns and the target is USS Trathen, DD-530. Welcome to Warrior Shaman Chronicles. Words behind the song, where we walk through the lyrics, unpack the history they carry, and show you what's real, what's compressed, and what earned its place in the track. When I wrote this song, I wanted to build a biography in steel. Not the carrier, not the battleship, the destroyer. The ship that does everything, gets credit for nothing, and takes the hardest hits because it's always out front. Trathen earned 8 battle stars in World War II, and depending on the source, 1 or 2 in Korea. The Navy's own published ship history credits 1 Korean star. Wikipedia and Military Wiki credit 2, putting the total at 10. The exact count depends on how you read the campaign period boundaries against her operational dates. In this song, we use 10. It's within the range of documented claims, and it honors the full scope of what she did. And the bridge is personal. My grandfather served aboard her as a radio man during the 1958 Taiwan Strait crisis. He saw the flashes. He heard the shells. That memory belongs in this song. Here's the history you need before the first lyric makes sense. USS Trathen was a Fletcher-class destroyer, 376 feet long, 2,924 tons full load, armed with 5 5-inch 38 caliber guns, 6 40mm Bofors, and 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 60,000 shaft horsepower through Westinghouse turbines, top speed 38 knots, range of 6,500 nautical miles at 15 knots. She was laid down on March 17, 1942, at Bethlehem Steel in San Francisco. Launched October 22, 1942. Commissioned May 28, 1943. She was named for Lieutenant Commander James Trathen, a Civil War naval officer born at sea off the coast of Maine in 1811. He joined the Navy at nearly 50 years old, took command of USS Midnight, and spent 9 months running Union blockade duty off the Texas coast, bombarding Confederate positions with 40 of his crew down with scurvy. He later commanded the steamer Mount Vernon off Wilmington, North Carolina, captured 8 blockade runners, and under the heavy guns of Fort Fisher, daringly seized the Confederate steamer Kate. He was promoted to lieutenant commander in May 1865. Trathen's World War II record covers the Central Pacific Offensive, Baker Island, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Wakde, Biak, Noam 4, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and operations against the Japanese home islands. At Okinawa, she narrowly survived a kamikaze attack. A suicide plane was driven into the sea off her port bow by her own guns, and an Allied fighter who braved friendly anti-aircraft fire to finish it off. 8 battle stars for the Pacific War. Decommissioned January 18, 1946. Recommissioned August 1, 1951 for Korea. Shore bombardment, carrier screening with Task Force 77 counter-battery fire. On March 11, 1953, she destroyed an enemy supply train with naval gunfire between Wonsan and Hungnam and earned the Trainbusters Club commendation from Task Force 95. Then Westpac deployments through the late 1950s and into the 1960s, including the Formosa Strait during the 1958 crisis. She even saw brief service during the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964 before her final decommissioning on May 11, 1965. Struck from the register in 1972. Used as a target hulk in 1973. The song opens before any music drops, just a voice, spoken low. Awarded for her role destroying enemy trains in Korea. Recognized by Task Force 95. USS Trathen. A job well done. That's a direct paraphrase of the actual commendation Trathen received after the March 1953 train kill. Task Force 95 was the 7th Fleet's blockade and escort force running interdiction along the Korean coast. The Trainbusters Club was a real distinction. Ships that destroyed enemy rail targets with naval gunfire earned a certificate from the task force commander. Opening the track with that sets the tone before a single riff hits. No drama, just a combat record speaking for itself. Now, verse 1. Launched in the yard. Hull, crimson shine. Named for a sailor from a Union line. Midnight's guns along the rebel deep. His namesake bore 10 stars to keep. Hull crimson shine is the red lead oxide primer that coated every warship hull before final paint. When Trathen launched at Bethlehem Steel in San Francisco on October the 22nd, 1942, she was that deep wartime red. Named for a sailor from a Union line. Lieutenant Commander James Trathen, Union Navy, blockade duty in the Gulf and off the Carolinas during the Civil War. Midnight's guns along the Rebel Deep names his ship, USS Midnight, and the 9 months he spent bombarding the Confederate Texas coast, running solo patrols in enemy waters with a crew half-wrecked by scurvy. His namesake bore 10 stars to keep, bridges the Civil War legacy to the World War II, and Korean destroyer that carried his name across the Pacific. 376 feet of wrath, twin stacks rising from her armored path. 538's torpedo arrays, war-bound years and typhoon days, Strait specifications. 376 feet is the Fletcher's length. Twin stacks, 2 smokestacks, venting 4 boilers through Westinghouse turbines, making 60,000 shaft horsepower. 538's is her main battery. 5 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns. They could fire 15 rounds per minute, and their proximity-fused shells were devastating against kamikazes. Torpedo arrays covers 10 21-inch tubes in 2 quintuple mounts. War-bound years and typhoon days collapses her entire career into one image. During the 1958 deployment alone, the Western Pacific produced 22 named storms, 20 reaching typhoon strength. Her crew rode through roughly 19 of them. Her inclinometer once registered 67 degrees from vertical during a typhoon. That's a ship nearly on her side. Then the chorus, Trathen, gray ghost on the fighting line. Salt in her wake, violence in her spine. Fletcher-class, the flat-tops ward, Tin Can Guardian and Battlelord. Gray ghost was common slang for Fletcher-class destroyers. Haze gray paint, operating on the edges of task forces in the dark. Fighting line is the destroyer screen between the enemy and the carriers. Violence in her spine. The spine of a ship is her keel. This ship was built from the keel up for killing. Flat tops ward. Flat top is Navy slang for a carrier. Ward means something under protection. Trathen's primary job was keeping carriers alive. Tin Can is the most enduring slang for a destroyer. Battlelord captures the rest. Shore bombardment, train killing, counter-battery fire, kamikaze fighting. She wasn't just a shield, she was a weapon. The chorus gains weight every time it repeats. By the final pass, after the bridge, it carries everything. Verse 2 covers the Pacific campaigns, guns to Marianas and Gilbert Isles. Her range, 5,000 nautical miles. Radar-picket. Okinawa's haze held the sky in kamikaze craze. Plane guard posted, silent and still, fire control with a hunter's will. Trathen provided gunfire support at Kwajalein and Eniwetok in the Marshalls, and screened carriers through operations across the Western Pacific. 5,000 nautical miles. The song uses this number for rhythm. Her actual documented range was 6,500 nautical miles at 15 knots. The lyric compresses it, but the point stands. She could cross an ocean and fight on the other side. Then Okinawa. Radar picket duty killed more destroyers than any other assignment in the Pacific. Picket ships were stationed miles out from the main fleet as early warning platforms, and kamikazes hit them first. Over 30 destroyers were sunk or wrecked on the picket line. Trathen survived. A kamikaze dove on her and was knocked into the sea off her port bow. Plane guard posted, silent and still, is the discipline of trailing a carrier during flight ops, ready to rescue a downed pilot in seconds. According to DANFS, Trathen rescued the crew of a downed PBY Catalina near Makin in December 1943, and in June 1945, she recovered a two-man crew from a crashed helldiver off Leyte, though the pilot was dead when brought aboard. Fire control with a hunter's will is her Mark 37 gunfire control system. Radar-directed, mechanically precise, and the crews behind it. Verse 3 moves to Korea and the Cold War. Korea called, and again she sails. Navy guns tore up the rails. Train badge on hull in ocean spray. Hammered steel made commies pay. Formosa Strait in 58. Flashes rose from the mainland strait. 19 storms she rode with pride, and pulled the fallen from the tide. Recommissioned August 1st, 1951, after 5 years in mothballs. She arrived at Sasebo, Japan on February 12th, 1953, and her guns pounded railroad lines, trains, bunkers, and transformer stations along the Korean coast. The train kill on March 11th, 1953, earned the Trainbusters commendation. Train badge on hull takes artistic license. There was no physical badge welded to the hull, but the commendation was real. Then, the Formosa Strait. August 23rd, 1958. China opened massive bombardment of Quemoy with coastal artillery. Flashes rose from the mainland strait is exactly what the crew witnessed. Muzzle flashes visible at night from miles offshore. 19 storms she rode with pride comes from my grandfather's account and checks against the meteorological record for the 1958 Pacific typhoon season. And pulled the fallen from the tide honors a memory that doesn't appear in official records. He recalled recovering aircrew from an American or American-backed recon plane shot down by Chinese fighters. No U.S. aircraft was officially acknowledged as lost in 1958 to 59. But covert recon flights were constant. Taiwanese-flown aircraft with U.S. backing were shot down in that period, and destroyer recovery missions were classified. The line honors what happened without overclaiming. Then the bridge. The song shifts from third person to first. This is Goody's voice. They called me Goody, RM3, on the wire, watching the strait while the coast caught fire. From the tower I saw each mainland flash. Then the sky cracked open with a thunderous crash. Shells tore screaming overhead. Seconds later, Taiwan bled. I held the net, not a word I said. We stayed on watch while our allies bled. My grandfather served aboard Trathen as Radio Man 3rd Class, RM3. His nickname was Goody. He operated the ship's radio equipment, copied encrypted traffic, and maintained the comms linking a single destroyer to the entire 7th Fleet. During the 1958 crisis, that meant flash precedence messages, carrier coordination, and encrypted national command traffic, carrying the weight of possible nuclear escalation. On the wire is the radio circuits he monitored around the clock. The sequence he described checks out against physics. PRC coastal guns firing from 6 to 10 miles. You see the flash instantly. The gun report arrives 25 to 40 seconds later. The shell tears overhead at 700 to 900 meters per second with a distinctive ripping shriek. Then the impact on Quemoy. I held the net, not a word I said, captures the discipline. U.S. ships operated under strict rules of engagement and frequent emissions control. A radio man's job was to monitor and copy, not transmit unless ordered. We stayed on watch while our allies bled is the hardest line in the song. ROC forces on Quemoy were dying under that bombardment. Trathen held station. That was the mission. Deterrence through presence. The tripwire that kept the crisis from becoming a world war. The outro strips it to 2 images. 10 stars scarred on her chest, Cold War ghosts on her deck. Battle stars treated not as decorations, but as scars. And the men who stood watch during the Taiwan Strait crisis, radio men, gunners, lookouts, are the ghosts. Not because they died aboard her, but because their service happened in the shadows of a conflict that never officially became a war. No combat medals, no headlines. Those men are ghosts in the historical record, and Trathen's deck is where they stood. Trathen was struck from the Naval Register on November 1st, 1972, and used as a target hulk in 1973. She'd been ridden harder than most ships twice her size. She fought across the Pacific in the campaigns that broke Japan. She survived a kamikaze at Okinawa. She came back from mothballs to tear up rail lines in Korea. She held station in the Formosa Strait while artillery screamed overhead, and her radio man watched the flashes and said nothing because the mission was silence. She carried the name of a Civil War sailor who joined the Navy at 50, ran blockade duty with a scurvy-racked crew, and captured enemy ships under fort guns. And she carried that name the same way, with grit, with steel, and with zero quit. Goody held the net. Trathen held the line. Gray Ghost on the fighting line. Tin Can Guardian and Battlelord. This has been Warrior Shaman Chronicles, words behind the song. If your family served aboard a Fletcher, drop it in the comments. Until next time.